Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC Louisville, which goes down this weekend. Another event, we're not at the Apex, which is great. We get the big cage, we get the crowds, and look, the rumours are, like I've said before, I think I said it last week, that the UFC are moving away from the Apex, and it is good overall. I don't mind one Apex event every now and then. You know, I do think that the Apex comes with some really interesting dynamics that you don't get at these arena events. But yeah, look, we're back on the road again with the UFC, and we're in another state, and yeah, it's going to be good. And look, from the card perspective, there's some really good fights on this card, like low-key fights that on paper just look absolutely great, and I think it'll be a fun event. Hopefully not a repeat of last week at UFC 302, which was, you know, one of the poorer pay-per-views that we've had in recent years, or maybe ever. So I do think there's going to be action on Saturday night. I do think that there's some really fun matchups in the making, so I anticipate a much more fun and wild event this weekend than we had last weekend, which is absolutely great. And there's also 14 fights on this card as well, so we'll get started very soon to fire through these fights as quickly as we possibly can. But just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, if you are wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then go to MMAplay365.com. You get everything on MMA Play 365 in regards to the subscription packages. You get all the handicapper advice, the fun parlays, the parlay options so you can build your own parlays. You get full written breakdowns, recommended bets, official bets. Then of course you get all the predictions from Baeza AI, which is our very own UFC prediction software. Last weekend we had a great event. The AI had a 75% accuracy. The handicapper, so myself, the official bets were profitable as well. 2 out of the 3 parlays won. From the 17 parlay options, 13 of those won as well. So overall it was a really great event. We're looking to hit this upcoming event running, keep that form going, keep the hot streak going, and let's get it. So if you do want to jump into the action, if you do want to have a little bit of fun from a betting perspective, then make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com. And that's it, with the promo out the way, with the introduction out the way. Let's get started on the breakdowns. We've got 14 fights to get through, and of course, as always, we start in the main event. We've got Cannonier versus Nassourdine Imavov, and this is a really interesting fight. Like, my process from seeing this fight and going into tape and, you know, trying to analyse the outcome and what's going to happen is, look, I thought Imavov minus 125, you know, we're getting a similar a low buy-in price like we got with the Dolidze fight, and I bet Imavov against Dolidze. I think I bet him at minus 150, and again that went up to like minus 175, minus 180, so I got some good closing line value with Imavov in that fight. And I thought the same thing again with Cannonier. I thought, look, Imavov, yes, he's not a plus money underdog, I get that, and I didn't expect him to be an underdog, but I thought, you know, minus 125, minus 130 is really low for Imavov. And actually, when I started to look into the fight, I was thinking, well, I think Cannonier is actually really live in this fight. Like, Cannonier seems to be one of these fighters where he just flies under the radar a little bit, and I don't, at least from my perspective anyway, like, I don't notice as much what Cannonier is doing as what I would with Imavov, for example, because Imavov is that up-and-comer and a fighter that people are talking about potentially being the next best thing in the division. And with Cannonier, he just seems to, you know, keep his head down, get his work done, and I feel like he flies under the radar. But like, you look at, you know, Cannonier's couple of fights in recent times, you know, you've got the Sean Strickland fight where he beat Sean Strickland. Not many people are beating Sean Strickland, especially in a 5-round decision. Strickland is a very good 5-round fighter. You know, Dricus du Plessis beat him, and obviously Dricus is now the champion, but Cannonier also beat Strickland over 5 rounds as well. And yes, it was close. Yes, some people will argue that Strickland should have won the fight. I actually bet Cannonier as an underdog in that fight. I expected it to be like a razor-close split decision, but I did give Cannonier the slight edge due to him just landing the harder shots, whereas Strickland was just sitting behind his jab. But, you know, without digressing too much, Cannonier did a good job on Strickland over 5 rounds. Then you look at Cannonier against Vettori. Now, how many people have actually done that to Marvin Vettori? Like, yes, Cannonier was hurt in round one. Vettori had his moment there for sure, but after then it was all Cannonier. And the pace that Cannonier pushed, and also he broke a volume record for the middleweight division, I believe, as well. So not only was he pushing a hard pace, but he was landing a ton of volume, he was landing power shots. The cardio on Cannonier is seriously insane, and he can do that for 5 rounds, and that's key because he's got 5 rounds here against Imavov. Now, with Imavov, I do believe that he is the better technical striker. He's going to be taller. I don't think the reach is going to be longer, which is strange. Cannonier's got a really long reach, but Imavov's definitely going to be the taller, longer fighter. So he's going to have advantages there. I think it's a fight that is going to be won and lost on the feet striking. If anybody tries to hit a takedown, I do think it's going to be more of on Imavov's side, but Cannonier's got a good takedown defense and he's got a good get-up game as well, so I'm not anticipating the wrestling and grappling to have too much of a factor on the outcome of the fight. So I do think that, you've got Cannonier who's got, pace, pressure, he's got good volume himself, and he's got power. He's definitely got the power edge here, even though Imavov hits hard as well. But Imavov's a more technical fighter, so it's going to be on Cannonier to not allow Imavov to dictate the pace and the range of the fight. If Imavov does, then Imavov's going to have a number of rounds here where he's picking up volume and picking up the winning of the rounds. And I just think with Imavov, I'm not sure that Cannonier allows Imavov to dictate the pace and the range of the fight. I do think it's going to be a close and competitive fight. I think that both fighters are absolutely going to have the moments, but the one edge that I like with Cannonier is the cardio edge. Now, Imavov's not a fighter that is going to completely gas out, but he's also not a fighter that I think has got 5 rounds of the pace that he would want to fight those rounds at. So, for example, the pace that he puts in round 1 is very active, his movement's good, but I think the longer the fights go on, the more it's going to slowly start to decline a little bit. And if Cannonier is putting a pace and getting in his face and, really putting the pressure on Imavov and putting him on the back foot, which I anticipate to happen, then Imavov, that gas tank will slowly start to drain a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker the more pace and pressure that Cannonier puts on him. And that's what I think is going to be the deciding factor for Cannonier here, because even though Cannonier hits hard, I don't anticipate him knocking Imavov out, although you can never rule it out with the power that he's got. And the same for Imavov on the other side. I don't anticipate Cannonier getting knocked out, but again, you can't be surprised either. I think it's going to be a back and forth war, but I think the pace and the pressure that Cannonier is going to put on Imavov is going to put him on the back foot, and that's going to allow him to slowly start to look better in the rounds the longer the fight goes on. So I do think it's close. I do think it's competitive. I won't be shocked with an Imavov win because, like I said, he is the better technical striker in my opinion. But I just like the other factors of Cannonier in regards to how he approaches fights and how he puts the pressure on opponents, how he puts that foot on the gas pedal. So for those reasons, I'm picking Jared Cannonier to win this fight. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, we've got a returning Dominick Reyes versus Dustin Jacoby. And it's got to be a must-win fight for Dominick Reyes. It's a real shame of how Reyes has fallen off over the last 4 fights. So he is on a 4-fight losing streak, and I don't imagine that if he loses this fight, he's going to have the opportunity to right the wrongs again in the UFC. I could be wrong, I don't know the situation, but it's very unlikely that a fighter with 5 losses in a row is going to fight in the UFC again, and that's just the reality of where we're at, not just in MMA but within the UFC. The thing is with Reyes and this 4-fight losing streak, the losses were to John Jones, which many people thought he won, and then it was Blachowicz, and then it was Prohatzka, and then it was Ryan Spann. So you can't really hold it against Dominick Reyes too much because they're all, really good fighters, world-class fighters. Ryan Spann maybe not so much, but he's still a fighter that hits hard. He's got a good skill set. And the John Jones fight, like I say, the fight was very razor close to the point where a lot of people thought Dominick Reyes won. But the problem that you've got is, look, Reyes clearly took some damage in that John Jones fight, that he didn't look the same afterwards, and he's been knocked out badly in his last 3 fights in a row, which at light heavyweight is definitely a concern. But it's not like he's taking a complete battering and getting finished by TKO. He's getting hit and getting put unconscious. So it does make you wonder, is that durability gone? However, we have seen it with other fighters before. Andrea Arlovski's a good example where we think the durability is gone and then suddenly, he's taking shots and he's not getting knocked out like he used to. So you can never be 100% sure, but for sure right now it's very hard to be super confident that Reyes can take these hard shots. And the thing is with Dustin Jacoby, he's not that powerhouse that is gonna put that pressure on you and hit you with that one big missile that's gonna knock you out completely stone cold out. Like, of course he's got knockout power, but it's not that one punch. You wouldn't associate Dustin Jacoby with a one punch knockout artist, is what I'm trying to say. He's a very good kickboxer with good strikes, and he mixes things together well, and he has got power for sure, but like I say, he's not really known for that one punch knockout power. The thing is with Reyes, I'm not sure if that is even going to matter, because like I say, Jacoby generally does have power, and I do think that I'm just concerned with Reyes being able to take shots, and the fact that this is in the light heavyweight division, again, it adds that extra uncertainty, it adds that extra red flag to it because of how Reyes has been knocked out 3 times in a row. Yeah, it's tough. From a technical perspective, I actually think Dominick Reyes could potentially be the better technical fighter. His kickboxing's always been good. He's long, he's rangy, he fires good kicks to the body, mixes his target area up really well. And Dustin Jacoby, although he's got a really good kickboxing skill set himself, and even between his UFC stints, he was having K1 bouts, I do think that Reyes technically is the better striker. Like I say, he's quick as well. He's sniper shots straight down the middle. But again, it just comes back to, is Reyes going to perform here and beat Jacoby without taking a punch back himself? I just don't see it happening, and I just cannot be confident right now that Reyes can take those shots. Look, if Reyes comes into this fight and he goes to war with Jacoby and he doesn't get rocked or hurt or knocked out, then things will change for the next time that I break his fight down, because I'll have seen something that's changed my thoughts and opinions from the previous fight. But until I see that, I just... Looking at how Reyes is eating these shots or not eating these shots from his opponents is very, very worrying. And like I say, 3 knockouts in a row, that's not good for your chin, your durability, your health either. So, yeah, I'm having a hard time picking Dominick Reyes here, because even if I'm right and Reyes is the better technical fighter here and, he's doing good work, he could do good work for maybe a round, 2 rounds, maybe 2.5 rounds, but all it takes, in my opinion, right now is that one shot, that one clean shot that I just don't know if Reyes is going to be able to take. And I don't imagine that this fight plays out and finishes without Jacoby landing at least a few hard shots on Reyes. So, yeah, unfortunately, it's not so much a technical breakdown in regards to skill set and how they match up from a skill set perspective. It is more from the concerns that I've got from Reyes and, the durability concerns. I think in regards to how the fight plays out, it is going to be a fight that's won and lost on the feet, not just because of the durability concerns with Reyes, but just because of how they both fight. Yes, they've both hit takedowns. Yes, they've both got a level of wrestling and grappling, the high-level UFC fighters, but they are both predominantly strikers. So I see that being where the fight's won and lost. And like I say, you add in the concerns and the red flags that we've got on Reyes' durability, and it does favour Jacoby in my opinion. So for those reasons, I'm picking Dustin Jacoby to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the young kid back again. We've got Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. And I think it's going to be an interesting fight, this, in regards to pace and pressure and how fast everything kicks off. Because, look, Ricky Turcios has had a couple of fights now that have been very underwhelming. He was a fighter that, in The Ultimate Fighter, he looked really exciting. High pace, pressure, scrambles, a really entertaining fighter. And then he had his Ultimate Fighter finale fight, and again it was fast paced, it was entertaining, really fun to watch. But then he goes on 2 back-to-back fights where they've both gone to very close decisions, and he turned into more of like a point scoring type of fighter than trying to put any pace or entertainment on for the crowds. And it was a little bit strange to watch, because it was completely, the last 2 fights are completely night and day against the fights that he had in the Ultimate Fighter and the Ultimate Fighter finale. So with Turcios, I'm not sure, what's changed, what's happened. Maybe it was just a stylistic fight that forced him to fight in a certain way because, it takes two styles and two fighters to make a fight. So maybe it was that. But I think if there is that entertainment and that high pace and pressure left in Turcios, this fight is going to bring it out of him because Raul Rosas Jr. starts fast. He's got explosive takedowns. He'll chain wrestle against the cage. He's clearly got power in his hands, which we saw last time out as well. And he's a very forward pressure fighter. He's not a fighter that's going to sit back and enjoy, a point scoring striking fight. He's a fighter that is going to make things happen. So even if Turcios is within that type of style now that he's just taking fights, point by point type of thing, then I think Rosas is going to drag that entertainment and that wild side out of him. And because of that, we're going to get a really fun fight. The one question mark that I've got, and again, look, Rosas Jr.'s only losses to Christian Rodriguez, which at the time, people were so shocked, and Rosas Jr., the hype train's derailed and all that sort of stuff. But actually, that loss has aged so well because Christian Rodriguez is now being known for, taking out these prospects, these high-level prospects that the UFC are putting in front of him. So that loss to Christian Rodriguez wasn't a terrible loss. It was actually, as losses aren't good, but it was as good of a loss as it could be. And it was also a very good learning lesson for him as well in regards to the pace and pressure. However, the point that I was just leading on to try and make is the one question mark I've got of Rosas Jr. is, has he learned from that pace issue? Because in this fight with Turcios, this could be very fast paced. Obviously, Rosas Jr. got Terence Mitchell out of there early last time out, so we haven't seen Rosas Jr. dragged into, a round 2 and a round 3 with wrestling and grappling, which is what Turcios could potentially get at him at, if that makes sense. So for Rosas Jr., I think he'll be the one engaging the wrestling and grappling, but Turcios has got very good scrambles. He's a good grappler, that's his base, and he will try and scramble and get better positions. So from a pace perspective, we're finally going to see Rosas Jr. in another fight where we're going to see that cardio tested, but I kind of think that he passes the test. I think it will be Rosas Jr. more in the driving seat. I think Christian Rodriguez is a better wrestler and grappler than what Turcios is. So even though Rosas Jr. eventually got at by Christian Rodriguez, I'm not sure Turcios gets to that point where he's getting at Rosas Jr. I think even if Rosas Jr. tires, he's still going to be doing good work in regards to the scrambles himself. So yeah, I like Rosas Jr. in this fight, but I do think it's a very good measuring stick to see where his cardio is at, see where his pace is at, see if he's learnt from the previous mistakes in the loss that he took against Rodriguez. So from that side, I'm really intrigued, but I do think that he's going to get the win. So for those reasons, I'm picking Raul Rosas Jr. to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Brunno Ferreira versus Dustin Stoltzfus. And Brunno Ferreira coming in this fight off a good win against Phil Hawes. I actually bet Ferreira in that fight. I think I got him at like a -110 pick'em as well, which again, he steamed all the way up to like -130, -140, I think. So again, I got some good closing line value on that bet. And look, it was a fight where, Phil Hawes had some holes, had some durability issues, similar to what I've just mentioned with Dominick Reyes. And Ferreira ended up finding the kill shot in that first round. So yeah, it's still a good win for Ferreira. The only knock on his record in the UFC was the knockout loss to Nassourdine Imavov, which I don't know whether that was just one of those fights where Ferreira got caught, and look, if he fought him another 9 times after that, would he win more than he loses? I think Ferreira's got a really good skill set. He's short, he's stocky, he's powerful, he's got good pace, good cardio. He's got some judo, some wrestling. His Brazilian jiu-jitsu is good as well. So he is relatively a full package. Whether he hits the rankings remains to be seen, but I am quite on the fence with that because he does possess a skill set where he's dangerous and skilled as well. So yeah, I like Brunno Ferreira as a fighter now. Dustin Stoltzfus is one of these all-round type of fighters where he's pretty good everywhere, whether it be striking, wrestling, grappling, but I don't think he's prolific at this level in the UFC in any one specific discipline within MMA. So I actually think Ferreira holds advantages in this fight. I think he holds a power advantage, a speed advantage, athleticism advantage, and if Stoltzfus does try and get this fight down to the mat and tries to get on top of Ferreira, it's difficult to get Ferreira down, but Ferreira's a good grappler as well. So what I'm trying to sort of get at here is I kind of think that Ferreira has Stoltzfus wherever the fight goes. I think on the feet, like I say, Ferreira's explosive. He's got good striking. He's got the power advantage. I think that he's got a finishing upside. I think even from a volume perspective, he could land a better volume with the harder shots and, have the decision upside as well from a striking perspective. Then you look at the wrestling and grappling, and I just think that might be where Stoltzfus is going to do his better work in this fight, but I still don't think it's going to be enough. I don't see Stoltzfus just taking Ferreira down at will and then, spending plenty of time on top of him. If there is takedowns from Stoltzfus, I think Ferreira will make Stoltzfus work for them, and if he is taken down, I think he'll get back up to his feet. But I could also see Brunno Ferreira taking Stoltzfus down as well and, doing some good work on top of him. So yeah, I'm coming back to I kind of feel that Ferreira's got Stoltzfus' number, so wherever the fight goes, I think Brunno Ferreira will just simply be the better fighter in those specific areas. For that reason, I'm picking Brunno Ferreira to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fight that could potentially be very, very entertaining here. We've got Julian Marquez versus Reese. Now, it's a fight where I don't overly trust either fighter in regards to, putting a solid 15 minutes on with no mistakes. And look, I appreciate at this level in the UFC, it's really tough and unforced errors are going to be made, not just in this sport, but in every sport there's unforced errors. You look at football or soccer for you guys in the US, and maybe a defender plays a short back pass to the keeper that the striker gets a hold of and scores a goal. Unforced errors are a part of sport, and I think that Marquez has had his fair share of them. Reese, I wouldn't say it's so much unforced errors, but there's inexperience there with Reese. Like, he'll be happy being taken down and he'll try and hit his arm bars and his submissions off his back. But at this level in the UFC, fighters are better than that. They're better than just getting in guard and being submitted. That's more of a regional scene being built up on the local scene with local promotions. At UFC level, like, if Marquez takes Reese down and Reese is trying to hit arm bars and triangles and submit Marquez, like I said, you can never really rule it out because it only takes one mistake from the opponent. Marquez leaves an arm in there, or it gets snatched up, something like that. But outside of that, yeah, I'm not sure. Look, Reese is tall, he's long. I think Marquez has always got a good first round in him. He's got power, but then that cardio seems to fall off a cliff a little bit and he goes in autopilot mode where, he's walking forwards, his hands are low, but he's still swinging bombs and he's still dangerous, but he can also be got at the same time and he can be hit at the same time. So, yeah, it's a tough fight. I don't think Marquez is round one or bust, but I do think if Marquez doesn't get Reese out in round one, then Reese has got the opportunity to start building his way back into this fight. But I'm leaning towards the experience of Marquez because he is powerful. He has got a finishing upside. If he gets into that boxing range and lands on Reese, he's got every chance of knocking him out. And I do think that Marquez has just been in there with the better level opponents, better quality opponents, and been in the UFC for a number of years. And he's gained that veteran edge here, that experience edge against the Reese, who's still finding his feet in the UFC, especially after, being knocked out by a slam last time out. He's not going to take too much away from that fight. So, yeah, I still think Reese is finding his feet in the UFC. I think Marquez has got a power advantage, he's got experience, and he's fought a better level of opponent. So for those reasons, I am going to slightly side with Julian Marquez to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is an intriguing one as well. We've got Punahele Soriano versus Miguel Baeza. Now, the irony of this fight, like, both of these fighters came into the UFC as, I wouldn't say like major prospects, but fighters that, the fans were definitely keeping an eye on in regards to how good they could possibly be, especially with Miguel Baeza. Miguel Baeza came in looking like an absolute phenom, hard low kicks. He's got the physique, he's got cardio, he's got power, he's very comfortable wherever the fight goes. And Baeza was looking especially a real prospect. And Soriano came into the UFC with a wrestling background, trains with Dan Ige, training at the right places, and has also got power in his hands as well. But both fighters appear to have just fallen off a cliff. And look, the UFC can do that to you, and it can be... The UFC level can be a very tough place when things aren't going your way. Miguel Baez is now on a 3-fight losing streak, granted. Two of those, Santiago Ponzinibbio and Chaos Williams, two fighters that, obviously Ponzinibbio everybody knows and loves, but Chaos Williams is a fighter that, I think is quite good as well. Then the Andre Filio fight, knocking Baeza out in the way that he did, that's a bit of a concern. Not that there's anything wrong with Filio, it's just... That's probably a good fight for Baeza to come off back-to-back losses, a 2-fight losing streak against decent opponents, to grab a win, but then gets knocked out in that first round. And then Soriano's only won one in his last 5, and that was to Dolce, Lungi and Bula, who I'm not sure he's even with the UFC anymore. So both fighters desperately need a win here. And it's tough to know what you're going to get, because Punahele Soriano, like I said, he's got that wrestling background, but he doesn't really go to it too much. And I don't know whether that's because he doesn't trust his cardio in that sort of high-pressure wrestling fight. And the cardio has been an issue in a couple of Soriano's fights. So, yeah, it's tough to know what to expect in this fight. If you're looking at a striking war, I kind of still like Baeza in regards to the power that he can generate, but what I'm concerned about is the durability. And is Baeza got a durability issue now, or was that, just that last knockout just a one-off knockout? It's really tough to know what you're going to get from this fight. Like, skill for skill, they're both very evenly matched, and on win streaks and in confidence, I think this would be a different fight. But like I say, it's going to be a bit of a desperate fight for both fighters, because neither fighter is going to want to take another loss here. Like I said earlier with Dominick Reyes and the losing streak, Baeza loses 4 in a row. Suddenly, does he get that 5th fight? It's a tough one. I think that both fighters are going to be very cagey, going to be very cautious. I don't see them going out, leaving the chin open and exposing and overexerting themselves too much with the striking, because of more of a, not wanting to lose rather than wanting to try and go out there and win. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the attitude of both fighters is, I don't want to lose, but I absolutely need to win this fight, and try to go out there and get that win. But I think it's going to be a bit of a cagey fight, where it's going to be a bit of a point scoring type of fight. In that type of fight, I think I'm going to side with Baeza. Like I said, it's very tough and it's very difficult to know what you're going to get. But just like even the low kicks, for example, Baeza, he kicks like a mule. So if he takes that lead leg of Soriano out early in this fight, then that suddenly stops a lot of attack from Soriano, a lot of the offense coming from Soriano, and then Baeza can slowly build into the fight, even if it is a slow pace, and just trying to, put some volume together and just try to take the rounds round by round. I think Baeza's got the ability to be able to do that, but at the same time, Soriano could come over the top with a big overhand right, lands on Baeza, and it could be lights out. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one to call, because I think it might be a bit of a point scoring type of fight, which, like I said, I hope I'm wrong about. I do think that Baeza maybe is favoured in that type of fight. So for those reasons, I'm picking Miguel Baeza to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is going to be a fun fight. I think we've got Thiago Moises versus Ludovic Klein. Now, what's interesting with Thiago Moises is, look, Moises has spent a long time at American Top Team in Florida, the main American Top Team. And for this camp, it seems like he's stayed at home in Brazil and he's done it under the Fighting Nerds. And I keep mentioning the Fighting Nerds. This is a gym that is really blowing up in Brazil right now. And to take, I wouldn't say take away, but to actually grab a fighter that normally, and has done for years and years, does their camp over at ATT in Florida, to keep that fighter at home in Brazil and have that fighter do his first training camp under Fighting Nerds, I think it's a big scalp in regards to, well, not a big scalp, but it's a big statement to make. Like, they are making a very, very big splash on the Brazilian scene with MMA. So it's going to be interesting to see what type of Thiago Moises we get inside the cage, doing a camp at a different gym, maybe doing things a different way. And he's got a good skill set as well. He's always been a decent striker. Even the Benoit Saint-Denis fight, he bit down on that mouthpiece and he just fucking went. And Benoit Saint-Denis, a lot of fighters will have crumbled under that sort of pressure. But, even though Moises did end up getting finished, he, like I said, he bit down on that mouthpiece and he said, no, you're not doing this to me. And he fought back and he landed some good shots. Now with Ludovic Klein's a really good technical striker. He's a fighter that's been up and down in the UFC. He came in with a bit of hype, got one of his trademark head kick knockout. Well, yeah, head kick knockout win from that southpaw side. Obviously finished it with ground and pound. And then, he had a couple of fights where he's maybe not performed, but then he's overperformed in some fights. But all in all, I think Ludovic Klein's a good fighter. He beat Ignacio Barramondes, who was a big favourite and who a lot of people were very high on. he beat Mason Jones, which at the time I was so surprised about that, because Mason Jones was and still is an absolute savage, and I hope it's not too long before he's back in the UFC. So Ludovic Klein has performed really, really well against good level opponents, and I think this is an opponent in Thiago Moises where Klein, it seems like when Klein fights a good opponent, an opponent that's going to bring it to him, it brings the best out of him. And I think Moises is going to do that to Klein. Where Moises is going to have an advantage in this fight, I think if he can take Klein down and get on top of him, I think Moises will do really good work. And that's definitely a concern for Klein, and he's got to have worked on that takedown defense. But he does have decent takedown defense. He doesn't get stuck all too often off his back. So again, has he ever fought anybody like Moises in regards to the level of grappling? Maybe not. I think that there is a chance that Moises could do good work on top of him, but outside of that, on the feet, I think is where the fight's going to have a ton of action. I think it's where it's going to be entertaining. Moises, we know, won't back down to anybody. He'll bite down on the mouthpiece. But the more Moises is aggressive and comes at Klein, I think he's going to leave openings for Klein to be able to land the straight left down the middle and then the head kick as well. And even though we know that it's Klein with a 1-2 head kick with his trademark move, he still finds that target. He still knocks people out with it. And it's one of them, like I always said with Khabib, everybody knows what Khabib's going to do, but it's, can you stop it? And I think that's very similar with this combination with Ludovic Klein. Like, he's going to hit you with the 1-2 head kick, but can you stop it because it comes out that fast? I think it's a good fight for Klein. I think Moises is going to bring the best out of him. There's definitely a concern if Moises gets on top. I do think he's going to be a very, very good topside grappler against Klein. If Klein can defend takedowns or get back up to his feet though and keep this fight standing, then yes, it's going to be a war. Yes, it's going to be entertaining, but I do like Klein to get his hand raised in that type of fight, and that's the way I'm leaning here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ludovic Klein to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Charles Radtke versus Carlos Prates. And it's an interesting fight. Look, I'm not completely sold on Charles Radtke. I think the Blood Diamond fight was a fight that, look, he should be winning, but he made such a meal of that fight. I think Radtke could have, I'm not saying he could have got Blood Diamond out of there. I'm sure he tried to, but, that fight had way too many moments for Blood Diamond to look decent in a fight where, like I say, Radtke should really be running through somebody like Blood Diamond. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Blood Diamond. It's just he wasn't quite ready for the UFC level. And yes, he's training with the right people. He was developing, and he did look so much improved in that Radtke fight, but he still wasn't quite there yet. So I think Radtke could have done a better job. Look, if that was Carlos Prates in there against Blood Diamond, I think it would have been wrapped up quite early. And with Carlos Prates, look, I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed in the performance that he had with Trevin Giles. Like, he was potentially losing that fight, potentially down after round 1, and then Giles was looking better in round 2 than he looked in round 1. But then Prates found that kill shot. And yes, Giles has had, I won't say durability issues, but he has been cracked and knocked out a couple of times. So, maybe that was a factor in why it looked a little bit easier for Prates to completely knock him out. But look, regardless, Prates has got power. Now, the theme and the common thing that happens with these Contender Series fighters that are absolutely hyped up to be the next best things is they come into the UFC, they have their UFC debut against an experienced UFC fighter, but an experienced UFC fighter that is currently on a bit of down form, maybe being finished a couple of times, and it's one of them where then the betting line's minus 300 for the Contender Series fighter that's got all the hype, and everybody's, nobody's backing the UFC experienced veteran who's on a bit of down form, and then suddenly everybody's shocked when the veteran beats that Contender Series hyped fighter. But then what happens is the next fight that Contender Series hype fighter has in the UFC, the odds are so much lower because of what happened last time, and then they get the win that everybody was expecting, and then they go on that long win streak. Like, it's happened so many times, it's almost like it's written in a book. And I think that Prates was having one of those performances where everybody's shocked and he's fighting that veteran and it's not going the way everybody thought it was going to go, and then he comes back in his next fight, except the difference is Prates managed to flip that script a little bit and get the win in the fight that he wasn't looking good in. But still, I think it was on the same journey, the same path, the same script that we've seen a million times before. And I think this is going to be the fight where we see the Prates that we were all expecting from the Contender Series. And I think Charles Radtke is the perfect opponent for him, because Radtke, again, is one of these fighters that's got a good all-round style, decent striker, decent wrestler, decent grappler. But is his wrestling and grappling good enough to A, take Prates down at will, and B, if he does take him down, does he keep him down and spend a lot of top control time? Have a lot of top control time over, or on top of Prates, should I say? I don't think he does. I can never say never in regards to ruling takedowns out. Maybe Radtke does take Prates down. But if he does take him down, I don't anticipate Radtke spending too much time on top of him. I think Prates can get right back up to his feet. And if Radtke tries the same approach of clinching against the cage and running the clock down like he did against Blood Diamond, look, Prates is taller and longer here. He's got elbows, he's got knees, he's got a really solid Muay Thai base. So I don't think that would be the best game plan for Radtke. And he definitely won't get away with that with Prates like he did against Blood Diamond. And then out in the open, yeah, Radtke's got a hard, he's got a good check left hook, he's got a hard right hand. Could he knock Prates out? Well, it's always a possibility when you've got some decent power behind you, but Prates is such a better level of striker. He also has hard strikes. He's got a good straight left hand, which we saw against Trevin Giles. He's got multiple head kick knockouts as well. He's got knees, he's got elbows. He's just a much, much better technical striker. So I think Radtke is going to be there to be hit a little bit. I think that's a massive danger with Prates, with the sniper striking that he's got. And I do think that when they're out in range, and the bigger cage is great for Prates here as well, I think Prates is going to land on Radtke, and it's going to give him a really good chance of knocking him out. But if he doesn't knock Radtke out, I think Prates will just do the better work throughout the course of the fight. Even if Radtke's trying to, get a hold of him and slow things down, I think that there'll be inactivity moments if Radtke is doing that, and the moments that are in space, it'll be Prates landing, and he'll be winning the rounds because of that anyway. So yeah, look, I think it's I think it's a step down in competition fighting Radtke than what it was Trevin Giles. Not by a long shot, but I do think it's a slight step down. But I think this is the performance we see from Prates, the performance we were expecting to see last time out, but that never happens because of that type of fight, which I've already explained. So yeah, I think it's a good fight for Prates. Should be putting together a win streak if he wins on Saturday night, and then we'll see him progress as the UFC goes on. But for this specific fight, yeah, I think he's got a good fight in Radtke here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Carlos Prates to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Brad Katona versus Jesse Butler. And look, I think Jesse Butler's had a rough start in the UFC, if I'm being honest. Obviously, having your first fight being Jim Miller, never easy. But then Brad Katona, although he's not a Jim Miller, Brad Katona's a really, really tough fighter to beat. He's got a good skill set. It's an all-round skill set, but he's good. He's good. And I think the striking is very calm, crisp and composed from Katona. I think his wrestling is a very underrated aspect of his game. He's got good topside grappling. And I'm just struggling to see where Butler actually gets at Katona, because let's rule the knockout out. So if Butler doesn't land that puncher's chance that every fighter in MMA has, with the 4-ounce gloves, especially at this level in the UFC, if Butler doesn't get that knockout of Katona, does he piece Katona up, land more volume, and outstrike him for 3 rounds? I just genuinely don't think he does. I think Katona's a better quality striker, and because of that, better movement, and he'll land more volume. So then, does Jesse Butler take Katona down? Again, you can never say never with takedowns, but I just find it really hard to imagine Butler going out there and just relentlessly taking Katona down. Katona's a good wrestler, both offensively and defensively. Then if Butler does get him down, is Butler going to spend a lot of time on top of Katona? Well, no, I just don't see it. I really don't see it. And look, I hope this is more competitive than I'm sort of making out here, but I kind of feel like Katona's absolutely got Butler outmatched wherever the fight goes. And the thing is, from Butler's defensive perspective, he can be hit, he can be taken down, and it's all the things that Katona needs to really build himself into a fight and look good. So yeah, I think it's a really, really tough fight for Butler, not just from a skill set perspective, but from a stylistic perspective as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Brad Katona to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a rematch here. We've got Andrea Lee versus Montana De La Rosa 2. And these two ladies last fought each other, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. Andrea Lee won by decision. And I don't think a great deal has changed since then. Maybe Montana De La Rosa, slightly better striker. Maybe Andrea Lee's starting to head into a little bit of a decline with her being 35. But both fighters are off form. Andrea Lee's on a 4-fight losing streak. Montana De La Rosa is on a 3-fight losing streak. So again, it's another situation. It feels like we've got a few of these on the night, on this event, on this card. But it's another one of these situations where both fighters just can't afford a loss. So is it going to be another cagey affair? Is it going to be very hit and miss, point scoring, trying to not make a mistake, trying to, just not lose the fight rather than going out there and winning it. And, you've got the potential of that happening. So, yeah, it's tough. And with Montana De La Rosa, path to victory more often than not is to get the fight down to the mat and, spend time on top of her opponent. And the thing is with Andrea Lee, she can be taken down. She has been taken down. She can be controlled as well, but it's not often we see a great deal of control with her stuck on her back and not being able to do anything. She's decent with her wrestling herself, offensively and defensively. And I kind of think that both fighters are going to have moments here when they're on top of their opponent. Because I see Andrea Lee potentially scoring some takedowns. It's going to come down to, what's happening on the feet. Because if the wrestling and the grappling is a little bit nullified, then it's who's going to have the better striking. And Montana De La Rosa, like I said, has improved her striking over the years. She had to. But I still think Andrea Lee is going to be more aggressive on the feet. I think she's going to pick her shots a little bit better and maybe land a little bit more volume because of that. Or even if the volume's close, I think that Andrea Lee might just look that slightly sharper striker. I'm expecting, if there is no finish for this fight, to be razor close. Could be one of those fights that goes to a decision and we've got judges dissenting and they're on either side, which, to be fair, it feels like at this point judges could, score any fight to any fighter. But I think that it's going to be close. It's going to be competitive. The fact that the wrestling could be a little bit hit and miss and maybe there's not much of an edge there, it will come down to the striking, where I still think Andrea Lee might just be slightly better than Montana De La Rosa. So for those reasons, I'm picking Andrea Lee to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Daniel Marcos versus John Castaneda. Now, one of the more interesting aspects of this fight is actually the betting line. There's some really interesting movement with the odds. Like, Daniel Marcos is a fighter that has been opening up at like -200, -250, and being steamed to like -300. And he opened up -250 against John Castaneda, which if you look at his last couple of fights or fights scheduled, you can understand why he's opening up at -200. But then all this money comes in on John Castaneda, and it's pushed the fight into a pick'em, and even started to flip the line at some bookies to push Daniel Marcos into an underdog. And I'm really surprised by that. I'm really surprised, not because, Marcos is going to go out there and whitewash John Castaneda or anything like that. I'm just surprised at all the hype that Daniel Marcos has and the fact that he's fought some really good opponents, and the line movement is very, unexpected, should I say. But in regards to how the fight plays out, look, John Castaneda is a dog fighter. He's a fighter that's got, reasonable power for the division as well. He'll come forward, he'll mix in takedowns and, try and get on top of his opponents, as well as striking with them and putting the pressure on his opponents. And like I say, he's one of these really dirty, ugly, gritty, grindy type of fighters that will dog the way through. And that's not, that's not an insult. That's a positive. That's the way that John Castaneda fights, and he wins fights like that, and it's entertaining and it looks good. The volume can be a little bit low, although last time out it was high volume. But outside of, those 100 plus strikes he landed last time out, I think the most he'd landed was like 55, 60 strikes in a fight before that. So, yeah, I think that Castaneda brings a certain style to the cage. The thing is with Marcos, and one of the key points with Marcos here is he's a very, very good striker, but not only is he good moving forwards, which obviously every fighter wants to move forwards, he's also good on the back foot as well, which is key here because John Castaneda is absolutely going to have moments where he's putting the pace and pressure on Marcos, and that's where Castaneda gets at his opponents, when they can't handle the pace and pressure. Again, we're in the bigger cage here, so that is going to help Marcos because, like I say, his movement is good on the back foot, his striking's good on the back foot, so it's not as if he's going to get crushed against the cage within a couple of movements forward from Castaneda if we're at the apex. But I like the fact that Marcos is good striking backwards. But then when Marcos has his moments moving forwards, Castaneda isn't as good fighting on the back foot. He tends to I wouldn't say crumble, but he tends to run a little stuck in regards to, how to deal with that pressure. So when Marcos is the one moving forwards looking good, that's when he's going to be able to really get at Castaneda. If Castaneda's shooting takedowns, I think he might get one or two, but Marcos's takedown defense generally is really good. His get-up game even better. And if Castaneda does get on top, he really doesn't usually have that much good top control time, and the opponents stand back up pretty shortly after anyway. So yeah, in regards to how this fight's won and lost, I think it's going to be a striking fight. It's going to be interesting with the pressure and the power that Castaneda brings, but I think Marcos is a better technical striker. I think he's going to pick his shots better. I think he's going to land more volume, and I think he's been in there with the better level of opponents as well. So yeah, I think in a fight that's won and lost on the feet striking, with Marcos being the better striker, I think Marcos wins the fight. So for those reasons, I'm picking Daniel Marcos to win this fight. Next fight, big stylistic clash here. We've got Eduarda Moura versus Denise Gomes. And in regards to the stylistic clash, you've got Eduarda Moura, who's the wrestler-grappler. We've got Denise Gomes, who is absolutely the better striker with power as well. So it's a really interesting dynamic in this fight. And the other side to this, which is strange when you find out who I'm picking to win this fight, is, and I think you're probably going to guess after I say this, is even though Denise Gomes is the better striker, Eduarda Moura is the better wrestler-grappler, that's where the styles are. Denise Gomes, in my opinion, is her wrestling and grappling is better than the striking of Moura. So where they're both weakest, Denise Gomes is stronger in that weaker area, if that makes sense. And that's strange because normally in these types of stylistic fights, it's the fighter who is stronger with both the weaknesses who ends up winning the fight. And I actually don't think Gomes, I'm not picking Gomes to win this fight, I'm picking Eduarda Moura. And the reason being is, even though Gomes is better where she's weaker compared to where Eduarda Moura is weaker, I think the wrestling and grappling is the biggest gap in skill in this fight. So although Denise Gomes is going to have a big advantage striking, I think the wrestling and grappling of Moura, that differential is bigger than the differential with the striking, again, if that makes sense. And because that's the biggest gap in skill, in my opinion, that's where the fight should play out. Like, I do see Eduarda Moura scoring takedowns. Like, Denise Gomes was taken down 5 times by Angela Hill, who's predominantly a striker. She was taken down 4 times by Loma Lookboonmee, who is absolutely predominantly a striker. And Lookboonmee actually had some decent top control time over her as well. And other fighters that Gomes has fought have been able to take her down. So, my line of thinking is, if Hill's taken her down 5 times and if Lookboonmee's taken her down 5 times, then Moura can absolutely take her down as well, because Moura is a predominant wrestler and grappler, unlike Hill and Lookboonmee. And then if Lookboonmee's having good top control time, like the difference between Moura's BJJ and Lookboonmee's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is just crazy. Like, that's a huge gap in skill on Moura's side. So if Lookboonmee's having good top control time, then you'd imagine Moura to have good top control time as well. It's just in the in-between moments, because all fights start standing, so Gomes is going to have her opportunities when the fight is standing, but I just don't anticipate Moura trying to stand and strike with Gomes. Like, even you look at the gym that Moura's from, she trains with Gelton Almeida, and I'm sure she's not sparring with Almeida, he's a UFC heavyweight, but, you look at Almeida, his MO is get your takedown and get on top, and that seems to be the MO of the gym. That seems to be the MO of Eduarda Moura as well. So, although Gomes is going to have some moments whilst the fight's standing, I do think Moura's going to be able to get the takedown she needs, and when she gets on top, I think she can get the top control time that she needs, either run the clock down on the rounds or get that finish on the mat as well. So I'm thinking Eduarda Moura in this stylistic matchup. For those reasons, I'm picking Eduarda Moura to win this fight. Next fight, this is one of the better fights on the entire card, I think. I'm not sure why it's so low down, and I feel like I say this every single podcast as well, but we've got Cody Stamann versus Taylor Lapilus. Now, when I first saw the betting line here, Taylor Lapilus was like minus 185, minus 190, minus 200, and at that point I thought, wow, this line's wide. Like, Cody Stamann's a decent fighter, but when you actually watch the tape, I can fully understand why Taylor Lapilus is that big of a favourite, because Cody Stamann is, boxer, wrestler, and although he doesn't use his wrestling too much, he does have a good level of wrestling when he does go to it. But the thing is with Lapilus, he's got like this godlike takedown defense where it's almost impossible to take him down unless you're a super high level MMA wrestler and you're relentless with it as well. Like, you look at Basharat last time out, and Basharat, is a very, very good wrestler and grappler, and it took him so many takedowns to eventually get Lapilus down. And even the first four or five times he got him down, Lapilus was right back up to his feet, and Basharat had to keep going back to the well, relentless, to the point where he started to tire out, shooting the takedowns. And eventually he did start getting some top control time on Lapilus, but that was only through persistence and relentlessness to actually keep going and going and going. Stamen doesn't have that level of relentless wrestling. So I don't think Stamen's going to be able to take Lapilus down at least very easily. And if he does, Lapilus just jumps right back up to his feet. So I don't think the wrestling and grappling is going to be a factor in this fight, which leaves the boxing of Stamen. Now, Stamen's a Golden Glove boxer. He's got decent power. We saw that last time out with Douglas Silva de Andrade. He rocked him, hurt him really badly. A fight where I actually bet Douglas Silva de Andrade as an underdog, cashed that. And so Stamen has got good combinations. He's fast with his hands and he's got some power. But Lapilus has got real good kickboxing. So not only is he going to use the hands like Stamen, but Lapilus is more likely to mix things up. He's have a varied attack. And Lapilus has got like nearly a 10-inch reach advantage over Stamen, which is nuts because they're the same height. So I don't know whether Lapilus has just got this freakishly long reach or whether Stamen's got an extra short reach, but there's going to be a big reach advantage with the hands, and I anticipate the same with the legs as well. So even though they're the same height, in a striking fight, you've got Lapilus that's going to be more varied with his attack, adding more kicks in than what Stamen will. And then Lapilus has got a reach advantage, a leg reach advantage. And I just think that Lapilus is the better quality striker. I think he's going to be faster and sharper with his strikes as well. He's going to switch stances. And although Stamen's going to have his moments in this fight, and it will be competitive, I don't think Lapilus is going to go in there and completely whitewash him. But I do expect Lapilus to defend any takedowns that comes his way, make the fight won and lost on the feet, and that's where Lapilus is not only technically better but more varied, and he has a longer reach as well. So I think there's a lot of upside here with Taylor Lapilus, and I can understand why he is the favourite after initially being very surprised at how wide the line is. For those reasons, I'm picking Taylor Lapilus to win this fight. And in the next fight, the last fight to break down, we've got Puja Tomar versus Reyes Amanda. Now, I'm going to be honest, I haven't put a ton of time into this. I've watched a little bit of Puja Tomar just because I've never heard of her or seen her before. And, I sort of brushed up a little bit on Reyes Amanda. Not totally impressed with Puja Tomar, if I'm being honest. She's very small for the division, and she is like a little powerhouse that will come forwards and, she'll wing big bombs and she'll try and be aggressive, but she leaves a lot of openings in doing that, not just from a striking perspective with a defense, but also she can leave openings for an opponent to quickly just, level change underneath the punches or get a body lock with double underhooks and be able to drag the fight down to the mat. And I think that Puja Tomar is just going to give opportunities for Reyes Amanda to get the fight down to the mat, which I think that's where Reyes Amanda is going to want to get the fight. However, I do think, like I said, from a strike and defense perspective, Puja Tomar leaves a lot of openings, and she's in the UFC now. She's fighting UFC caliber competition, and it's a UFC debut as well. So I think that Puja Tomar's style is going to be there for Amanda to counter and to hit her. And if it's not quite working out for Reyes Amanda, I think she can take her down and get on top, where she should be the taller, longer fighter, which is again difficult for the shorter fighter being on bottom on the mat. So yeah, I think there's, like I say, unless Puja Tomar's leveled up ridiculously from a last fight to now, and we have seen this before, by the way, where a fighter hasn't looked great on the regional scene but come into the UFC and look like a stud. So maybe Puja Tomar has got that, development in a game that she has improved, but from what I've seen, I think Reyes Amanda should have a way with her here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Reyes Amanda to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Whether you're on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, or whether you are on YouTube tuning in and listening, thank you very much for doing so. If you are on YouTube, please drop a subscription to the MMA Play 365 YouTube account. It really does help us. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. If you listen on one of the podcast platforms, you want to come across to YouTube, have a chat, tell me where we disagree on picks, tell me who you're betting, where you've cashed last week, or, whatever you want to do. I'll always try and get back to the comments. And whilst you're over there, like I said, just drop a subscription to the channel. We'd really appreciate that. And finally, before we go, again, if you're wanting to jump into the action, if you're wanting to have something going from a betting perspective this weekend, then look no further at MMAplay365.com. We've got plenty on there, and it's all in one subscription package. So whether you want Baeza, our UFC prediction software that's giving out percentage predictions for every possible outcome of every single UFC fight on every single UFC event, or whether you want to mix things up with the handicapper, which is myself, where you've got full written breakdowns, recommended bets, fun parlays, fun parlay options to build your own parlays, and the official bets of where my money is physically on for the fights, then you've got everything in one place. That's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.